My name is Sean Alemayehu Tewodros. I'm a U.S. military veteran. I'm from the bloodline family of Abyssinians Tewodros II of Abyssinia, and I'm a traveler, a researcher, and author who specialize in retrieving Ethiopian history.
So, from US to Addis and different places in Ethiopia, you travel a lot, like Gondar and other places around Gondar. So, how you watch things in Ethiopia?
Well, when I first come to Ethiopia, Gondar was the first place I traveled to after arriving in Addis to notice that castles who predate the castles that were placed in Europe and England and various places. And I noticed that the replicas are in Europe and the original castles designs are in Ethiopia from Gondar. I also learned of Ethiopia being very religious and having religious history that goes far back as even Genesis in the Bible. My first discovery in America was that Ethiopia is the first country named in the Bible. So therefore, the Bible is based on Ethiopian history. From there, I learned that the American Bible, King James Version, had 66 books, and the Ethiopian Bible had originally 81 books. So from there, I've learned that there's a relationship between the Bible, Christianity, Judaism, that's based in Ethiopia, that started and spread around the world.
So, in Gondar, you saw a lot of things in the Bible. Ethiopia mentions a lot of places in the Bible. The actual history when you saw for the first time Gondar Castle and other heritages in Gondar, how do you feel about these heritages in Ethiopia?
Well, I feel pride, but I also felt cheated because we were never given this information from across the world. When it comes to Ethiopia, the European and Americans, they seem to downplay Ethiopian history. But for me to come to Ethiopia and see these places, it's an unbelievable sight to see because the history goes further back than a lot of the structures that established in Europe today. Even with the Blue Nile River, which is the Nile River, or they call it Gihon, it's actually its roots mentioned in the Bible is right here in Ethiopia, and part of that is Lake Tana, and Gondar was a strategic place because many of the castles that are in Europe now were based on the architectural design. So Abyssinians who built Gondar castles were also the architects in Europe who built those castles. But one thing I did notice in Europe is the castles, they tell you all the king families, royal families, but they never want to mention who built those. And they never take credit for building them. So from coming into Gondar and seeing the castles, I realized that the origins are here in Ethiopia.
Even though you are the descendants of King Tewodros from Ethiopia, and you born and grow in US, you saw a lot of civilizations in America. But when you came back to Ethiopia, like Gondar, Gondar was established before America is founded by Christopher Columbus. And Gondar has a state, modern state government before America established as a state. So how do you feel when you see this kind of relationship between two countries?
Well, it's incredible. First off, the Gondar history is indeed a lot older than American history. But there's a tribe in America called the tribe of the Cherokee, and actual the descendants that come and make the Cherokee are actual ancient Abyssinians. So there's actual history of Abyssinians settling in America before Christopher Columbus. And this was told to me by my grandmother from my mother's side, who we have Cherokee blood. And before she mentioned we're really Ethiopians, for me it was kind of confusion at the time, but I didn't understand what she meant until later on, that the Cherokees were indeed ancient Abyssinians who had traveled. So the Abyssinian people, the Ethiopian people, have been around this world a lot longer than European travelers, Vikings, and so forth, the colonizers. So Ethiopian history is indeed thousands of years, and just to see that Gundar, the administration, predates America, shows that there is absolute greatness within the people of the continent now called Africa, because they are the civilizers of the world. Everything, all the knowledge comes from Ethiopia, comes from the continent of Africa, and they have taught many people, many Europeans and even Americans that have taken the land and settled today. A lot of the knowledge, a lot of the buildings itself is Ethiopian heritage architects. This is some things they said in our history books. They said a little bit in American history books. But if you go to the libraries in America and do deep study, you'll find out that a lot of Ethiopian architects were indeed in America in its earliest days, because they were considered the master builders.
You also published a book about your tour, your travel from US to Africa, Ethiopia. And so what is the motion and the message you want to proceed to the others in your book?
Well, my book, from learning from my family, I took a lot of photos, especially from Lake Tana monasteries, the islands of Lake Tana, and the monastery churches. I've taken some photos and have seen Abyssinians photos there, religious photos, artwork, and to my surprise, I've taken a trip to England, and I noticed that there's a lot of treasures that was taken from Ethiopia that show Abyssinians with a much darker complexion, from Michael, the Gabriel, all the angels, Xavier, the Messiah. All of these are in England today, and they're not European faces. None of them are European faces. And I think the part of the history of the Battle of Magdala, Tewodros II was trying to preserve the history, the historical foundation, because most of the treasures that was taken to Britain, again, are Abyssinian faces. They have no problem with that. But when I traveled to Ethiopia and America, I see the same characters like Saint Michael that are in European attire. But let me not say attire. Let me say faces. However, their clothes are Abyssinian design.